We're live.
Good afternoon. Hi, how you doing? Good. We're gonna try to keep this under 6 hours.
Good boy. If you don't, just two of us so far? Just two?
That's all I see, the three of us. I see three of us so far. These old stuff, see. Well, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Afternoon.
Do you know that people still waiting to get in?
Um,
We don't have member Eisenband. However, we do have a quorum, so we can begin the meeting.
Okay, we have a quorum and it's that time. I think we ought to proceed. Good afternoon. Welcome to the virtual Financial Advisory Board special meeting of Thursday, September 24th at 2:30 p.m. Kindly silence your cell phones. May I have a roll call, please, Ms. Thompson?
Member Riyami,
Here.
Member Stump,
Here.
Member Greenwald,
Present.
Member Eisenband, Vice Chair Moore,
I'm here.
Chairperson Stern.
I'm here. Okay. Will you please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of
of the United States of America,
and
to the republic
for which it
for which it
stands,
stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
visible,
liberty.
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? All right, hearing none, we'll proceed. Is there a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
Motion to accept.
Okay, may I have a
Second.
second, please? Thank you.
Second.
All in favor? Say yes. Anybody
Yes.
opposed?
Aye.
Okay, are there any public comments, Joan?
There are no public comments.
Thank you very much. Are there any corrections to the minutes of August 20th, 2020? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
Motion to approve.
May I have a second, please?
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say yes.
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 Anybody opposed? Thank you. Unfinished business, there is none. Going to new business. The first piece of business is a discussion on the external auditor contract extension. And I refer this item to the finance director.
Good afternoon. This is our annual, this is our external auditor contract for preparation of our annual comprehensive annual financial report. We are, when the town did the original RFP back in 2015, it allowed for it included a 3-year extension. This would authorize staff to execute that 3-year extension, and it's at the same prices that they included in their original proposal back in 2015. And staff would recommend that we extend it. We don't want to be trying to change auditors in a year in which we are putting a new financial information system in place. It's just too many moving objects at the same time. And it will benefit the town to have an auditor who is familiar with our finances the first time we're going through an audit after the installation of our new ERP system.
Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
I'm sorry?
I'm fine with Matt's explanation, although I think that in general, 8 years is a little bit long to go without a formal contract review with any consultant or contractor such as an auditor. This has nothing to do with the job that they're doing. And I fully understand that in changing systems and, you build up trust with people that you're used to working with, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not aware, Marshall would know, I'm not aware of any actual policy that the town has in terms of when or how often contracts need to be reviewed or put out to bid. But again, I'm not saying we change anything in this instance, but as a general rule, I think that 8 years is a bit on the long side. That's my only comment.
Finance Director, any response? Do you agree or?
Well, the rule of thumb is that you want to, with regards to an auditor, you don't want an engagement lasting any more than 10 years for sure. Given the shrinkage of the number of firms that are seeking contracts on local governments, I'm not sure that we'd end up in a much different situation if we were to put it out for bid than we are in right now in terms of both price and selected.
Yeah, I think my point has more not to do with these specifics, but just in general. I mean, you don't want to stir the pot too often, and clearly it can be a lot of work for staff, and it can also be counterproductive. On the other hand, if you wait too long, it's, there can be a certain amount of complacency. It's nice to get new ideas every once in a while, or even just to test the waters and look around again. I'm not looking to agitate for change at this point. I'm just bringing it up as a philosophy for the future. I mean, I think probably 5 years or so is a good time to just in general review contracts. That's all. I don't want to make a big deal out of it.
Question.
Go ahead.
How's the performance been of this auditor? Have they delivered everything on time? Any issues that have come up since they have been our auditor?
No, they've performed well. It was cumbersome to do it this last cycle as a result of everything associated with COVID-19, but that would have been the case with any firm. But they're performing well and doing things in a timely manner.
The Vice Chair really just answered one of the questions I had. And the other question I have, based on the market, are they competitively priced with what's out there at this point?
I believe so. I believe so.
Oh, I see Neil's here. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you. Hello.
Okay. If there are no other comments or objections from the board, then I would recommend that we proceed as suggested. Just give me a yay vote if you're in favor of proceeding. All in favor, say yay.
Yay.
Hey,
Anybody opposed? Okay, then that will be our recommendation to continue. Thank you. The next item, and probably the major item on this agenda, is the discussion on the 2020 revenue sufficiency and rate study. And again, I'll refer this over to the Finance Director presentation.
Tuesday, there was a discussion on the 15th. It wasn't last Tuesday. It was actually on September 15th, the presentation made by the town's water and sewer rate consultant, Raftalis, to the town commission regarding their study. And it obviously led to quite a bit of discussion, and it also led to some requests for additional information. I believe that information has been assembled and will be included in a presentation that Raftalis is prepared to do today to the Financial Advisory Board. With that in mind, I would introduce Mark Tuma and Robert Ori, who are from Raftalis, the town's water and sewer rate consultants. They are ready to do a presentation with a few enhancements, much the same as what the commission saw on Tuesday, September 15th, but with some additional information to address some of the issues that were raised. And then I guess we'll try and address whatever questions the Financial Advisory Board members have afterwards.
Okay, I'd like to make a comment before that. In watching the meeting, and hopefully most people did, if not all, the points brought up by the town commission as it relates to the structure, rates, and town uniqueness were all valid, in my opinion, in determining the most equitable solutions to a conversion. I don't think it seems to be a question of whether we should, or a question of how. And the other question I have for you is, when the presentation, would you prefer, as the commission did, to ask questions from our board as they come up, or would you prefer we wait towards the end of the presentation to ask our questions? What would be your?
This is Rob. First of all, good afternoon.
Hello,
Mr. Stern, any way that's best for you. A lot of times I allow questions to happen as they occur because they're right on your mind when you're thinking of it. Because you wait to the end, you may like, gosh, what was my question? You know, so if it works best for everybody to ask during the presentation, that is fine. We can wait to the end.
all right. If nobody
whatever
has,
works best for you.
if nobody has an objection, then we'll ask questions as they come up.
Yeah.
Would that be okay with the board?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, then let's proceed. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Welcome. Can we go ahead and PowerPoint? Again, good afternoon. For the record, my name's Robert Ory. I'm Executive Vice President with Raptalis, and also Mark Tuma is with us today as well from the firm. He has been a lead analyst on preparing a lot of the analyses that you'll see today and whatnot. So I appreciate him being here. And I also thank the opportunity to talk to you all today. Next slide, please. What we'd like to do the next several minutes is talk a little about the purpose of of our study. Hold on a second. Get mine up too. Also give a little bit of an overview of the utility, just some facts to think about as we're talking that may be helpful. Some of the drivers affecting rates. More importantly, talk about rate design. That was mentioned by the chairperson about rates, and then have a dialogue there and talk about any recommendations and action items going forward. Study purpose, next slide please, is really we want to develop a sustainable and cost recovery plan. To me, that's the first primary issue is the next 5 years. We want to make sure that our rates, no matter which direction you go on rate design, that you fully recover the cost of providing service, maintain a strong fiscal position, fund your capital plan with a balanced portfolio of pay-as-you-go capital rate and or debt financing if you need it. And secondly, and just as important, look at providing alternative water and wastewater rate structures, with the driver for this being the wastewater potential adjustments. Next slide, please. A little bit about the utility. You've got about 460 water and wastewater accounts, but they make up almost 4,400 equivalent dwelling units. As you can imagine, a lot of those dwelling units are in condominiums, and apartments, multifamily type customers. Was there a question? Okay. The average use per residential dwelling unit, they're very different. Single family, the pure average, this is just taking the total flow divided by the customers, is 25,000 gallons per month. Residential multi-family dwelling units, about 5,000 gallons a month. Major driver difference, outdoor irrigation is probably the big issue in terms of land application of water per dwelling unit is the issue. Again, we talk a lot about averages. That was mentioned in the commission meeting because it puts a point on things, but I will tell you, you have some users using 5,000 gallons in residential and some using 105,000 gallons. It's all over. But we look at averages a lot just to help present some of the aspects of cost and recovery. Existing rate revenues, right now, a little bit over $3 million. You can see it's not quite 50-50 between water and sewer, but you do have a very predictable revenue stream right now. 63% of your revenues comes from that fixed or base charge. That's the flat rate charge, regardless how much water you use. Your wastewater is 100% fixed cost recovery right now. There is no flow, as you know. Depreciable assets, you have over $31 million of assets. It's a significant system, but that doesn't include really wastewater treatment, which is provided by Delray. If you had your own wastewater plant, as you can imagine, that number would probably be at least 10 million, if not more higher, if you had your own plants. And of course, we haven't looked at rates in about 5 years. So one of the reasons why we're here today, to keep you on the same path and keep you fiscally strong and address your rate needs as appropriate.
Rob, I have a quick question for you. Hopefully it's quick.
Yeah, sure.
The 63% fixed revenue recovery, is that basically when you look at all the bills, what's the amount of revenue that's coming from the flat rate versus what's coming from the flow charge per gallon?
That is exactly correct.
Is there a standard or best practice as to what that percentage should be?
Well, I can tell you this. That's a good question. Number one, if you're the water management district, and this was very big over in Southwest Florida, Tampa, Sarasota, whatnot, their kind of benchmark was 30%. To be honest with you, if you're Moody's and Standard & Poor's, the higher that fixed cost recovery, the more predictable, sustainable to pay debt. They like a higher fixed cost recovery. Normally I see between 30 to 40, 45% is kind of that acceptable range. This is a little high, but it's not that it's bad, it's just on the higher side. I usually see it lower than this.
Is there, I guess I noticed as I read through that water management study, or there's something about every municipality has to have a certain amount of water conservation built into their rate structure. Is there any kind of like threshold, with respect?
Again, a good question. What I've seen through all my years of experience, and you can tell I have some, I got that gray hair now, but there's a couple things. One is the water management district won't tell you what blocks to have, but they will encourage you to have blocks that have enough signal to promote conservation. But two, they look at essential use, discretionary use, and then excessive use. And if you think about that, essential use is indoor use, cooking, bathing, those type of things. And that's you got to have that to live, basically, right?
And it sounds like you guys think that's about 4,000 per household per month?
It ranges. Normally, I see around 4,000 to 5,000, 6,000 gallons. Some are higher, but as we'll talk about 10, 15 slides from now, we've tried to recognize that in the rate design relationships between water and sewer. Also, if you think about indoor use, that is usually the flow that goes back to the sewer system because it's indoor. Discretionary use being an allowance for irrigation on your turf. No one wants brown grass. They're promoting xeriscape and all that, but there is a level of discretionary use. It also could be car washing, things of that nature, if you think about that way. Excessive use is I'm putting way more water on my yard than I should, over an inch a week, let's say. And that's what they target. I will tell you, some of the water management districts also look at per capita consumption. I know South Florida also looks at that. I'm having there's issues. I know Manalapan, for example, they have just lost Hypoluxo as a customer, and one of their concerns is the high per capita use of Manalapan proper versus their water system prior to Hypoluxo leaving, 3 weeks ago. So they do look at per capita demands. They want that down. But they don't say. I'm not sure who asked me a question, but they don't say to you, town of Highland Beach, you need to be blank. They will look at it. Also, the long answer, but your consumptive use permit for your water plant will dictate that you will have a conservation promoting rate structure. That's usually what they say. That's an issue right now with Sunrise. By way of example, their first block is 0 to 30,000 gallons a month. Clearly, it goes beyond indoor in a discretionary use, and they have received comment on that, as I understand, that they need to tighten that, sharpen the curve, and promote more conservation. So that is,
Okay, so I guess my question is Highland Beach is not at risk of our, it looks like we are well below the maximum threshold of.
no, I don't think you're below you have a risk. Your rates, your blocks promote conservation. I have not heard of any challenges or issues or letter sent saying, hey, you need to do something. You have a conservation promoting rate structure.
Okay.
Water system today.
Okay.
Just as like I'm thinking about it myself, if you go to an alternative wastewater flow charge, you think about that because wastewater could become variable flow charge. That kind of promotes conservation too, if you think about it, because you can adjust your bill because by changes of your water use habits. So that's something to think about as we're moving forward. But
Yeah, I was just coming from if we needed to make any kind of change to our rate structure in order to comply with what the waste management rules are. It sounds like we're not at risk of that at all.
I don't think personally you are on the water side at all. Unless the town has gotten a letter saying you need to do something. I have not heard that, and it doesn't appear to be out of line.
Okay.
They could do is say, hey, tighten that first block, get really more into indoor use, but you're kind of different. So I think that was okay.
Okay.
Next slide, please. Those were great questions. Thank you. Well, some of the drivers affecting rates, I'll go through these relatively quickly if you saw the presentation. I mean, the first one is you have limited customer growth. You're essentially built out. There may be a customer or two here. And many utilities, growth has been a benefit to them. As you continue to grow, of course, that produces new revenues for new customers, et cetera. And the point here is it's called net revenue margins. And that's the amount of money that's left over after you pay all your operating expenses. By way of example, if I have $1 of revenue and 60 cents pays my labor, chemicals, power, insurance, whatever, that 40 cents left over, or a 40% operating margin, that's what's available to pay debt, fund your capital improvement program, and have reserves. It's a very important rating agency ratio. You look at that. The key is to maintain margins as much as you can to promote ongoing capital reinvestment, which promotes, as you know, the going concern of the utility. If those revenue margins keep dropping, next thing you know, you get into gosh, the only way to do my capital is issue debt. It becomes very inflexible, very difficult, and it'll result generally in higher rate increases over time. So by having less customer growth, we've got to focus on that margin to make sure we maintain that. And that's why you look at rates for 5-year blocks to maintain those margins. So that's been a good thing. Inflation and operations. The Congressional Budget Office back in January, February projected inflation about 2.3%. I will tell you it's a little lower right now than that, but it moves back up to around that range over time. What we have seen is that utilities generally incur cost increases higher than inflation. We're very labor intensive, chemical intensive, electricity, I guess is the word, intensive, and we have a wholesale wastewater contract. So if you think about those costs, generally they rise a little faster than inflation. So that's a driver as well. I mentioned those items, labor, power, et cetera. You can see at the bottom of the slide. That's about 63% of your total expenses, just those 4 items. And that's fairly typical, I'll be honest with you. I see these ranges a lot. Your overall average increase in cost, we have estimated about 3 to 3.5%. And that's very typical in the industry today. That's what we're seeing everywhere. And the rate in the inflation's worth about 24% or so of the overall change in cost over time. It's there. It affects us every year. Another driver facing the utility on the next slide is phasing out the debt that's being paid right now through the general fund. We've got roughly, we had in the plan, we had about a 5-year phase out. And a couple of things we did here. First of all, doing this really promotes full cost of service. Your water and sewer rates will recover the full cost. That kind of also follows the enterprise fund method of financial accounting or reporting. Like I said, I mentioned a 5-year phase out. The other thing we're recommending you do as part of the payment of debt service, right now you've got about $2 million of water connection fees on deposit. I believe those were collected over time from development for expansion related capital costs. So your 2007 bonds were to expand the RO, the reverse osmosis or RO plant. That's clearly an expansion project. And we recommend that you pay the principal of this loan with these funds to help you buy down this payment over time. And the second reason why we think you should do that, you don't strand these dollars because it can only be used for expansion. You can't use them for, say, for O&M expense or operating expense. You can't pay labor with it. So let's use this for the purpose and whatnot. We thought that would be a good use and a good idea as you phase into a full cost recovery from debt. This is a significant adjustment. It's about 43%, 44% of your total need for rate adjustments. And you can see there's a couple points I want to make here. If you look at the last line in that graph, all the way to the right, you'll see a number 1,205,413. That number there, that's the amount of debt that's now in the rates at the beginning or in 2025. There is some benefit happening over time. If you look at the first line, 2021's debt service is 1,549,000. We do have some debt dropping off as you go across that row there to the right. You'll see it drops a little bit. So we reflected that. So you have some cost benefit coming, but by the end of 2025, it's right about 1.2 million. If you recall those factoids I gave you earlier about the total revenue of the system at $3 million, 3.2 million, that's a pretty big adjustment, 1.2 million of 3.2 million. So if you think about that, that's a pretty big driver. So that's affecting the rate increase. And next slide, please. The capital improvement plan, this is a driver for utilities all across the country. I will tell you that we do have a plan provided by staff. It's about $6.2 million is the plan. That includes wastewater collection system rehab and lift station improvements. Wastewater is the driver in terms of the CIP this year, although most of your costs in the past have been water related. We still have water treatment plant improvements. So relative to 6.2 million, next slide please, the funding plan in the rates is that we have a mixture of use of reserves, operations, and additional new debt for the system that's going to be funded from the wastewater side. You'll see a renewal and replacement, the middle line exactly on that graph, or a table, excuse me, account. What we like to do is segregate capital funds from operating funds so we can kind of see where our plan is going. I mean, you can commingle reserves and capital. We like them separate because they have, to us, they have different meanings. You know, operating reserves or, you know, rainy day funds, health fund, O&M expenses. There could be storm events, whatever. Renewal and replacement capital, we're replacing pipe, we're replacing, you know, RO trains, we're all that kind of stuff. And where reserves meet the daily demands, the capital is a little bit more lumpy. If you think about it, you build up, you have a big expenditure, you build up, you should fund it linear, you know, every year, but your spending may be, you know, more like this. So that's why we like to separate them. But again, we have additional debt plan in fiscal 22 for the wastewater collection program. And that number could change as staff keeps looking at this. To the extent that comes down a little bit, then obviously that would have a positive impact on the plan. But that's the level we have in the plan right now. Next. I mentioned the debt. This is your debt service payments are in blue, the existing debt. We did assume a debt issue in mid 2022. That's the red that you see there. We did interest only for the first 2.5 years or so. We call that a wrap. By doing that, we're not trying to raise the existing debt as high as we need to go. We're trying to limit that so that when you see the blue drops, when some of those bonds start maturing, our debt drops, then we'll fill that in with the additional debt. And if you look at the column under 2024, which is the fifth bar over, you can see we have a drop. But even with the existing, the new debt, our debt payments are projected to be less than the debt payments you're paying today in the general fund. So you bring that over, and it drops in the future. This is really good because if we set rates to recover these costs, hopefully as we move forward, you'll have additional capital reinvestment dollars so that we can try to limit debt in the future and provide the most flexibility for your system. We think that's really good. As a small system, you do not want to be debt burdened. You want to have flexibility in case something comes up or is an issue. But so that's what the plan was looking like. We're real excited that you have this step down and it's not being refilled with completely new debt, which is great. Next slide, please. That all being said, this is your total funding requirements is the bar. We talked about operating expenses. We talked about that R&R transfer, capital reinvestment and whatnot. You really can't see this. There's a little tiny bit of capital fund from rates. That'd be a truck. It's sliver in 2023. And then the debt service coming on to the system from rates to be funded. Now, if you look at the line, I'll call it the blue line, the solid line, it's going down. And the question may be, well, how can that be? If that's my rate revenues, why is that dropping? It should be, it should be staying flat. The reason why that's dropping is that also includes the transfers from the general fund to help pay that red square there that's in the bar to pay the debt service. So as that contribution declines over time, our cash inflows, revenues, contributions, interest income declines, and we got to bring that back up with the rate adjustments to get back where we are. I will tell you, the plan doesn't quite fully recover to the end, but we have, we think, enough cash to help phase rate adjustments in over time. But they're going to need to be front end loaded a little bit. Slide, please. And when I mentioned front end loaded, this is the rate adjustments we've identified right now. We showed 2 lines for water, 2 lines for wastewater. And we did that on kind of purpose to show, first there's an inflationary type adjustment, that annual inflation happens every year. Even if we were not adjusting rates at all, I would recommend that you continue to adjust your rates for inflation, 2%, 2.5%. Just keep up with that revenue margin. That's the first part of this. And then the additional rate adjustment for water, you see 12.5%, it goes down over time, for example. That's the fill the void above the general inflation. That's the debt being now funded from rates versus the general fund. That's funding the additional capital needs and that R&R fund. The additional debt on the wastewater side for the collection system. All that is somewhat built into those other numbers. And then on the bottom line is the average increase over the next 5 years. I will not tell you it's not significant, but as you'll see in a few minutes, your rates are very competitive. And a lot of this change again, if you think back, 1.3 million debt to $3.3 million of revenue, 33% of the adjustment is just moving the debt to the utility, if you think about that, which is fairly significant. But you will stay competitive with your neighbors, and we can show that here. I'm not sure that's the next slide or not. I can't remember what the next slide is.
A quick question.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, the recommended adjustment, I'm assuming that each of the years it's compounded. So
Yes.
if you add the 18%, then the base goes up, and then you add 12% to that base, and then 12%, is that correct?
That is correct. You're absolutely right. They're not additive, they're compounded. That is correct.
Thank you.
And the 18, why you see such a strange percentage of the bottom, most of your water customers are also sewer customers. There's a blend there. It's kind of like an average. And when you put the two together, what's the water and sewer bill increase to the water and sewer bill today? That's why the rate increases are an additive, but they're compounded this way, like you observed. That's correct. So, okay, next slide, please. Recognizing that the level of rate revenues or rate adjustments and whatnot, we target our rate design to recover that level, to move that line up to the top of the revenue requirements bar that I showed you in a minute. But I want to talk about your existing rates for a second, so you all will get a visual of what you have today. And this gets back to the question really about that fixed cost being at 63% of your total revenue. You the water side, and these are bi-monthly rates every 2 months. And you can see you have a flat charge of $33.59, and then you have your conservation blocks. Now, on the surface, 0 to 19 looks like a very high block. You say, my gosh, 19,000. But if you divide that by 2, it's roughly 0 to 10,000 gallons, which is more akin to indoor use. We're reflecting it as that. Normally, I still use a little lower, 5,000 gallons a month for indoor use. Your bigger properties, you are somewhat different. And I felt that this is probably a decent range to be in, 0 to 10. And there's another reason why I'll talk to him and get the sewer. The other point I wanted to mention to you, there's 2 other points, excuse me. If you look at multifamily water, the blocks are different, number 1. And number 2 is the prices are different with regards to the second block. I'm not sure why that is, to be honest with you. If you're charging everybody the same per unit flat charge, the implication there is the demand or the capacity reservation per unit is all the same per each dwelling unit, which is very typical. I see that a lot. However, if the flat rate's going to be the same, the flow rate should probably be the same too. And in this case, multifamily is not there. Yes, they have a lower beginning block, 0 to 13,000 gallons. I understand that, but again, 1 to 1. Why they only that class only pays $2.90 for the second block? I don't understand that. It should probably be at the same block as residential and commercial.
Yeah, so I have a question about that too. As I look at some of the other, what other water companies do, yeah, are we like the only ones that do this? Have a different rate in multifamily versus single family?
This type of structure, I would say yes. I haven't seen too much of this. And where I'm referring to is the second block being, $1.30 less than the residential. I don't see that hardly at all. I do see 0 to 13, 13 to 23. However, when I see that, the base charge for multifamily also is not $33. It's a percentage of that. They call it a meter equivalent or ERU basis. By way of example, a house is always 1, but in many instances, multifamily use less water, what they usually do, and they may be a factor of 0.8, 0.5, 0.75. So that if I had a 0.8 factor for multifamily, just by way of example, the $33.59 times 0.8 would be $26.87, let's say. But the blocks would be less. Here you got kind of combined, and that flat charge is very important to the system from revenue stability and cost recovery. It's very, very important, as we'll show you in a minute. So although I see some of the block differences, I don't see the pricing like you have it. And our recommendation is going to be to make it consistent, to be honest with you. You're getting ahead of myself here a little bit, but that's what you're going to see. Flat wastewater, I know you already know this. Everything is a flat charge, $44 a month. Whether I contribute nothing to the sewer system or 100,000 gallons of sewer system, I pay $44. So again, per unit as well. So
Robert? On on the 13 to 23, since most of, I just was curious as to existing now, since most in the multifamily are in that first block in the 0 to 13, right? So it probably currently, even though the 290 is off in the sense of the 13 to 23, I mean, is it really affecting us very much currently?
No, I don't think it's affecting you significantly. For those that trip in the second and third block, and you do have some, but your observation is correct, and we'll show you that as well. Most of the flow on multifamily, because you have so many units, they all kind of stay within that first block. Second, you have a lot of vacancy. Let's say multifamily, I know you have vacancy in single family too. But a lot of times they leave their irrigation system, they leave their systems on to irrigate. We don't see a lot of zero bills in single family. But if you got vacancies in multifamily, that's why that flat charge is so important to you, because they're still paying a capacity reservation type fee to have that water plant there and the Delray system facilities there to serve. So that's very important, but your observation is right. But we will show you how that gets affected later, but your observation is a good one. Next slide, please. In fact, talking information on flow, let's get right to it. Again, I mentioned the fact to which the average use per month, again, averages, they can range a lot. The average for residential is about 25,000 gallons a month. Keep in mind those blocks that you see to the left, that's bi-monthly. So this would be technically a customer using 50,000 gallons, every billing period, every 2 months. Lot of flow on residential in the second and third blocks. Over 70% of the flow is there. Yet on multifamily, excuse me, as was accurately mentioned, just under 90% is in the first block, because you have so many units. And if you think about that average 5,000 gallons per month for the whole year with vacancies, you can see that drops again. Hence why we really want to maintain a base charge there for those guys. But they are different, very different.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So the water percentage adjustment that you're recommending is a 15% increase, right?
Yep.
So, but the fixed rate component of the water bill, you're recommending go up 30%, right? Because it's going from 33.59 to the 44.
No. It's going from 33 to, I'll show it to you.
It's 3863.
Yeah, if you go back up a slide, please, back to slide 12. That 44 is the wastewater side.
Oh, wastewater. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Gotcha. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
we can't forget about those guys,
Gotcha. Okay, sorry.
That's not the increase. I'll show you the increase in a second, but do keep that thought in mind. Don't lose that thought, please.
And so I guess my other point that I need clarified is this recommended rate adjustment, let's just say for the October 2020 of 15%. Is that up for discussion, or is that, that is what we need, right? To meet the objective of what we're going after, which is to be fully funded from the.
I personally think that's what you need to meet the objectives you have of being fully funded in a standalone utility without general fund subsidies of general fund transfers of the debt service. Again, we're doing that over time.
Okay, so really, are we just trying to? It sounds like we're just trying to figure out. Okay, we need this type of increase, like 15, 12. It's a discussion of how quickly we take it, right? Or maybe how long it takes us to get there. It's not a matter of. We know how much we need to be, right? It is.
Yes, you do.
It's a matter of the timing.
That's a good question. I think the answer, and you can have a lot of different answers to this. What I'm trying to get to is The objective is to phase out the debt being paid by the general fund, for example. And I'm going to answer your question by way of an example. If I extended that phase in for say 8 years or 10 years, that would drop that expenditure. I could lower the rates. Okay. I picked a 5-year window because we were doing a 5-year forecast. And my thought was, this is your objective. Don't prolong this thing forever. You should get to your objective. And I thought 5 years was reasonable.
Okay, so I guess, so sorry to interrupt you. So I think one of the things we need to consider, or maybe is up for discussion, is the timing that we want to take. Do we want to use your recommendation of 5 years? Do we want to make it quicker? Do we want to make it longer? And it has implications on the percentage increase every year. And then I think the other thing is like how we get there, right? The changes in the flat charges, the blocks that we establish, and then the rates.
Right. We try to come up with a plan that met all the objectives and also the objectives of fiscal sustainability, ability to issue debt. And we try to look at rate, when you change rate structure, which we're getting to now, there's always winners and losers. It's very different. And it's difficult. But the key first is, what do you want to recover? And that's what you're kind of asking right now.
And the timing of it too. I mean, it's not just
that's it.
Like everybody wants the water to be fully funded. I just think it's a matter of how much time it takes us to get there and what percentage increase by year is tolerable.
Right now, what I'm presenting to you is 5. If said, Rob, Mark, make it 8 or make it 2, I would have different recommendations for you. And you've got the 2 endpoints, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know what they are, but you know that if I extend it longer, I can drive those down. If we shorten it, we'll probably narrow the rate increases, but then you'd have uniformity thereafter. You wouldn't need 5 years from now. You'd need indexing, maintain the margin, for example. And that's what you want to end up to be is you don't have double-digit increases every year. You want to be very controlled at that 2 to 4% range every year. That's where I think you want to be, and meeting all your requirements and funding needs and maintaining capital. That was the plan we were trying to bring in. But let's go to the rates again. If you go down one more slide, please. Another slide. There you go. So we've got 2 options here for your consideration. This is the water structure. Again, those existing rates I mentioned to you earlier. If you don't, wait one second, I need to turn on my fan here. My window is the southwest side, and it gets really hot here. This again, you got the current rates over here on the left, just as a reminder. And the first option you have is keep it business as usual. Just keep it the same way you got now. Just raise the rates uniformly. And there's pros and cons of this that I'll talk about. And you can see that right here. The second alternative is to, and this would also links to sewer, is to adjust the rates to recover the cost and recognize what's going on with sewer. We kept, in the alternative, we kept the flat rate the same. We really want to maintain the revenue stability of the water system. There's not a lot of change here, but it is subtle. We raised the first block to 20,000 gallons, 19, very subtle. It's a slightly lower rate than the uniform rate. Why did I raise it to 20? Why do I add 1,000 gallons? It's all because of wastewater. If you go to the alternative rate, you think that indoor use again, we put indoor use at 10,000 gallons. And so we want that first block to be essential use and be consistent with the wastewater flow alternative, if that's the direction you go. Then instead of having these larger blocks, we phased in and steepened the curve a little bit on water conservation. And how we looked at the levels of service. If 10,000 gallons is the typical level of service you give to a customer, and that's typical across Florida, 350 gallons per day approximately, that's what the Florida Department of Environmental Protection used to always say for permitting, 350. Utilities are at 300 to 250 right now. They're lowering it because of conservation and whatnot. We looked at each one and said, okay, those are good break points, 350 gallons per day per customer. And so we went 20 to 40 for discretionary use, then 40 to 60 and above 60. So we spread it out a little bit and phased in the pricing. This moves some of the dollars to the outer end, but we get our revenue stability in the front end. When you look at the rates comparisons, not a lot of change in the water, but it helps us a little bit on the sewer side. So that was what we came up with between water. Alternative 1, across the board. Alternative 2 is the alternative rate structure. Sewer is much more pronounced. The next slide, please.
Oh, hold on, sorry. If we could just talk about, hold on that just a little bit. I just want to point out, when we look at the water management study, most other, there's a chart that says, which is a summary of the utilities in Florida. And I just want to point out that most of the utilities have 4 tiers. So I thought that was interesting.
That's right.
You know, so that's like the most common, is having 4 tiers. The other thing I would point out as far as observations on this is kind of pointing to your comment about the percentage of costs coming from fixed, and you're saying it's 63%. And then, you know, there's a chart from the study, and it shows how many of the utilities, like where their fixed rate falls. And the mode there is most utilities have their fixed flat, you know, their flat charge somewhere between the $10 and the $20 range. I'm not suggesting, you know, and then us being at 33 and going to 38, we would be in this $30 to $40 range, which very few utilities.
Now keep in mind, most of those utilities in the $10 to $15 range is monthly. This is bi-monthly. So your monthly rate is 14.
Oh, okay. So we do, okay. So we do fall.
You do fall there. You do fall.
Okay.
And most of your fixed cost recovery is on the sewer side, because it's 100% fixed, not the water side.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're not out of line here compared to other utilities. But there is one I do want to point out about that is the first block. Many utilities I see are 0 to 5,000 gallons, for example, monthly.
Okay.
We kept your block, existing block. We didn't think it was that out of line at all. And to get to the alternative rate, we didn't want to do a lot of disruption up in the early rate, because those low-end customers are going to get a break on the alternative rate anyway because of the change in the fixed cost recovery on wastewater. So we didn't want to do a lot of change here when I didn't think it was warranted, because you're getting it on the sewer side.
Okay. That makes, okay.
So, and let me show you what I mean by that. If we can go to the next slide real quick. Again, you have your flat rate existing, $40, $22 a month, $44 every 2 months. Across the board increase would be $55. But if you look at the alternative, it's a lot different. The flat charge drops to $28.58. Why does it do that? I've got a flow charge. I'm getting revenue from flow now. So I can't charge $55. I got to charge something less. So what we did to get the flow charge, we looked at your expenses and whatnot. And really what that charge is primarily is the cost of purchased water from Delray. Delray bills you on a volumetric basis based on the amount of wastewater you deliver to them. Okay, there's no fixed cost with them. It's purely volumetric. When we looked at the gallons that we used to do the rate design, which I'll talk about that in a second, we came really close to the Delray flows of their billing. Keep in mind, sewer flow on your system is based on water use. Billed wastewater Delray is based on wastewater meter. They're two different things. You hope they come close together as a proxy. That's why we wanted to stick with indoor use, because there's a higher level of confidence that the indoor use is what's being returned to the sewer. I know there's inflow and infiltration, that's all part of it. But indoor use bill on sewer, it matches what's kind of going to Delray. It's fair, and it's also very common practice in the industry. I'm not telling you everybody bills has an indoor use only. That's why we have 0 to 20 for residential, and it stops. There's no more billing, no more flow being billed on residential service. That includes multifamily as well. But again, most of the multifamily flows are going to get billed. We said if you're outside indoor use, you're not paying a sewer bill. Commercial, which has incentives for profit. You have a few commercial customers, a hotel or something like that. They pay usually 100% of their flow on sewer.
Okay, so your alternative rate structure is more in line with what we have to pay for with Delray.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all flow. That's how we got that. That's how we got that rate.
Okay.
So about that rate, we lowered the flat charge, but we didn't want to really try to recover your requirements. The goal is to try to recover the same amount of revenues under both scenarios. If the across the board, the $55 produces $1 million of revenue, we want the alternative to try to produce $1 million as well. But as you can see, looking at this, the alternative is much more riskier. There's flow tied to it. If your flows drop, your revenues drop. You're always going to get $55 a month, a quarter, bi-monthly, every time, no matter what. The issue is, well, wait a minute, why am I paying for flow that I'm not contributing? That's the argument.
I guess another question, I don't know if you know the answer to this. When you base wastewater based on flow, does the water department get more like calls and stuff from customers saying, challenging the flow and saying, I filled my pool up this weekend, can I have a reduction to my wastewater? Like, would we be subjecting the water department to more customer calls or something if we base it on flow?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I'd probably have to ask Matt to address that, but the example you did give is one that they get calls on.
Right.
If there's there may be other policies we want to adopt, like one time a year pool. Right. Right. I do see that. I will also see if you have an excessive use provision where you had a leak and you didn't, you used a lot of water. I've seen some people give some breaks on that. They don't give it away for free, but you cap the sewer. Say, well, okay, if you use 100,000 gallons of water, we're going to cap your sewer at 20. We're not going to charge a sewer, for example. You may have calls like that you may not have gotten before. But I don't think they'd be voluminous, but they'd be, you can address them a lot better. So yes, I imagine there'll be some differences in service with your customer service with a different rate. I will tell you this, there may be some calls on, wow, my rate structure changed, what happened? If you're a high-end user, which I'm going to show you in a second, you're going to get a higher bill. In fact, we can probably go there, and this may help probably spawn some more questions. This also, I think, going to answer some of your questions as well. So let's go to the next slide real quick. And we want to go to Excel. What we did is, while we're getting there, we put some other information together. It's a little easier to show on an Excel spreadsheet than it is to put in a PowerPoint presentation. If you could go to the tab to the left, please. This a little difficult. Let me try to explain what we have here. The green chart you see to the left, this is broken down between water and sewer. This is the projected revenues from the proposed rates that we anticipate to get. And the alternative produces a little bit more revenue, and it gives a little bit of a price elasticity hedge. But if you look at, again, back to that first column is called current 2020. That's the rates today. And that, remember I mentioned, $3.2 million in revenue? There it is right there. And you can see on this chart that multifamily is your biggest customer, which you guys know. But you can see what the revenues come down. If you just raise rates across the board based on the water increase and the sewer increase, that's the column that says with tier adjustment 2021. The tier adjustment is going from 0 to 19 to 0 to 20 on residential, and multifamily fixing that, put the blocks the same, okay? Get them all the same. So the rates are the same, but it's still the same structure you have basically now. There's for sewer, it's a flat charge only. You go to the alternative, that's the revenues you would get under the alternative rates, and that percent you see there is the increase above the uniform rate. The commercial class would get a fairly good increase because all their sewers now being built. They don't have a cap, but you can kind of get a feel for where the costs are. More importantly, let's look at the flows per customer right now. So this links to revenue, but if you look at that, I guess it's blue, the bluish color in the middle right there. And you guys saw this earlier, but we want to show you 3 years worth of flows, how they've kind of gone. For water, again, that second block is the big one. Same with sewer. I'm sorry, that's multifamily, excuse me. It's the same, but you can see in 18, we had a lot of water sales. I think if I remember right, if that was the year, I think we had like 2 months of no rain or something like that, if I remember right, our house. But 17 and 19 are very similar in amount and where they fall. And 19 is what we're basing our rates on, just to kind of give you an idea. But it is higher than the other two, than 17. But that's what we're basing on. But I thought you find this interesting. Again, the average use for a dwelling unit is that column Q. What's probably the most important is the orange chart to the right, which if you can move that over a little bit, just a little bit further. I've got pictures blocking it. Can you go a little further over to the, no, yeah, that's right. Go a little further. Keep going. I want bigger, I want it moved.
You'll have to unhide the columns, whoever's control. Yeah, if you grab like W and then go all, yeah, and then and just right click and hit unhide, you should be able to move more. I hid the column, so like, I hid the columns, Rob, when I did it. No, you have to drag it all the way to the end. So like take the W and then drag it. Keep going. Yep. There you go. Oh, sorry. There you go. You got it now. Yep, you're good.
Yeah, okay. So
Sorry about that.
I want to talk about, we had a lot of discussion about fairness and who's paying what, and multifamily is not paying a lot, and they're getting a break because the blocks are getting extended, even though we're promoting uniformity, consistency in rates, and consistency in capacity. And I really believe we're doing that. And if you look at the average cost per gallon, if I'm looking at water by itself right now, the residential, and how we get this, we take the total revenues billed divided by the total gallons used. And the residential class, on average right now, is paying about $4.83 a 1,000 gallons. That's their bill. Multifamily is $5.81. They're the highest, and commercials in the middle. Now, I totally understand that multifamily uses less water than a residential, and so the per unit rate would drop. But this is really being driven not only by that, but more importantly by the base charge, which links that says everybody has the same capacity for dwelling unit. So when you look, that's why that base charge is so important. So when you look at that average bill per customer, they are paying the highest. If you look at uniform, on average, they're still paying the highest. And even with the alternative, they're paying the highest, but it's more in line than we were before. And so they are paying their fair share of the cost of providing service. The same with residential on sewer, it's the same thing. Residential goes up a lot, and multifamily actually drops a little bit. Why that is the if everyone's paying $44 a bill right now, you got people who eliminate flow that are paying flow, and that's multifamily. They're subsidizing, to me, on the sewer side, the system, for the fact they're paying for flow that they're not using per unit.
Rob, I think I think you hit on a really important point. As I watched the previous meetings, there was a lot of discussion about fairness.
Yep.
And I don't have a clear definition on what's fair, what most people think is fair. So I do agree with you. This chart is really good. It's showing the effective rate per gallon.
That's right.
On, the bill. And I guess I would like, and I'm not asking you, Rob, I think I'm more asking maybe the commission or, constituents, what do people define as fair? Because I think that, I think what's causing this, this discrepancy and the average cost per gallon is it's exactly, it's that flat rate that's being charged versus the amount per flow. So we can monkey with the relationship of the flat rate to the rate per gallon in our rate structure so that we can get this effective rate to be whatever it is that we want it to be. So that's what I feel like I need in order to really evaluate this, is a clear definition of what everybody thinks is fair.
And before you get there, let me just throw some else out as you're all thinking about this. The key is, keep in mind that you want to make sure that you do not eliminate the base charge or lower the base charge too low. Yes, that'll bring down the multifamily, but keep in mind, they are lower users. You've got that capacity to serve them, whether they use it or not, so to speak. That's same for any customer. So especially on the water side, that base charge is very important. The reason why you see shift is totally because of the flow on sewer. You're shifting dollars. In fact, I'll show you in a minute. You're shifting dollars to the up to the larger users. We can show you some bill examples that'll show that. But they are paying the highest rate, and I think they should. They're the largest users. Number one, you saw it over on the first graph, and there's the most units there on the second graph, and you've got to have capacity to serve them, especially on the water side. So I expect them to be a little higher, and even with the block change and spreading it out, they are still the highest, especially on the water side as well too. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that to you, Vice Chairperson, just let you know about that. But
and Rob, I guess the other question I had too, I did notice the fluctuation by year when we look at the history. There's a few, some years, I guess it says low as 430 million gallons.
yeah, if you could click to the left just a little bit, get that blue chart in. I think that's where you're at. That's good. That's good. I don't want to lose the other one. Yeah, you can. Is that what you're talking about? The column.
Yeah, how this what you're proposed. I don't think it matters, but does it really matter what
Perfect.
year you use?
Well, it does to some degree, because if we were to use the fiscal 18, for example, be honest with you, we have more flow, less cost, less per unit cost, but you have more flow, the bill doesn't change. I think the year we use of 19, and we just looked at, got the 17, 18, and we got this accumulated, is a very good test year.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty much.
But you're bringing up another point. And the point is, if you think about the two endpoints, if you're 100% fixed, you don't care about 349 or 443. You don't care. I'm getting blank dollars every time. Let's go to the other one, 100% variable. You really care. You don't care about the units, you care about the flow.
But the problem with the fix though is then we're not complying with the water management.
Exactly.
So we have to keep that in
And
mind.
that's why I think the proposed rates comply with the water management district. Actually, I think they'll be pleased with it with the blocks and collapsing the blocks. They also will like that sewer, although it's not water, by the fact that it's variable related, does provide somewhat of a conservation incentive because you can't adjust your bill now by use unless you go beyond the cap. That's also a measure. I think they'll like it. Those that use less, zero for sewer, they're not going to pay for it. I think they're going to like that. And those that they use more, they're demanding they're demanding it.
Sorry to be monopolizing this, but I also heard the comments of seasonality.
Yes.
And I looked at the chart that we received that showed the flow by month. And I also looked at what other towns do. It doesn't look like any of the other neighboring towns do anything with
Yeah,
seasonality.
click there. No, that was brought up and I made the comment, I didn't think seasonality would work personally. It wasn't that I don't like the rate. You've got to have a to me, a pronounced difference between summer, winter, wet weather, dry weather. What's your season? The season could be 3 months one, 9 months of the other. And a lot of people are using it. And plus year-round customers, it doesn't matter because they're going to pay the rates no matter what. So we looked at the bi-monthly billing for residential and commercial this fiscal 19, just to kind of see what it was. And it was relatively level. Yes, February, March is low. Part of that is there's 28 days in February. I was a little surprised at that. But there was.
Yeah, I mean, I think the arguments for the seasonality were that maybe there was I don't know, I'm assuming, I didn't really hear the specific, but maybe there's a higher demand January, February, March, and maybe a lower demand in the summer. And as I look at the chart, yeah, February had, out of 2 out of the 8 years, had the lowest amount of flow of the of 12 months. So, October of 2016, that was the lowest flow. In 2015, the highest flow occurred in July. So, I mean, I think where, people were coming from, I think maybe people were expecting that it was consistently higher demand in January, February, and March. But when I look at the, by month results, that is not the case. We've got some high demand months. I think when it's, and I think it's the irrigation. I think it's the irrigation.
I totally agree with you. I was, be honest with you, first when we did this, I thought we'd see a much bigger variation in the winter. All your residents are down there in the winter. Intuitively, that's more use. I was somewhat surprised so I had the same reaction you did, to be honest with you. Number one. Number two is this also tells me it's an irrigation demand basically all year. So even though I'm gone, the irrigation demand is happening, whether it's single family or multifamily, which also says if the single family has more turf per unit to be irrigated, they're placing the highest demand the customer. Why you need the conservation blocks? That's the class that really is demanding the capacity. If you think about it, when you look at average use per customer. But I was a little surprised too. I expected to see a much more of a bell curve, higher winter, lower summer, and we didn't see that. You looked at more years than we did actually, and you came to still the same conclusion. So I don't think seasonal rates would probably be a good fit for the town. Not that you can't do it. I still think for the complexity of understanding the rate, changing the rate every season, whatnot. I just didn't think it would be a good fit for the town, but that's not saying you can't do it.
Okay, and I think the other rationale for seasonality is when you have high demand but low supply. And do we ever have issue with low supply?
I don't think so. That's a question for Marshall and Matt. I don't think you do.
Okay.
We do not have supply issues. We generate enough water to service the town.
Good. Thank you, Matt. Let's show you some of the effects. So,
Can I ask a question?
yes, definitely.
Oh, this sort of goes back to the first slide, but I think it bears on all of this. It said on the first slide there were 464 accounts.
Yes,
So most people's water bill they receive through their homeowners association or through the building.
that's correct.
So that means most people in Highland Beach have no idea what they're paying for water, which means all of this talk about conservation and how the rate will affect people and what's fair is completely beyond the average person in Highland Beach. They don't even know they're being charged for water, many of them.
Right.
Okay,
Well,
I just
I-
want to
I
make sure
think-
we
I
all
think-
understood that.
I think they know they're being charged.
Well, they might know nothing is free in life, but to say we're going to change the rate structure this way or that way, and people are going to respond in some way, like, you know, I'm a consumer, but I'm not the customer here. So
Well-
I could never change my behavior because we change the rates if I don't know the rates.
Well, there's a couple things there. First of all, you're absolutely right. The multifamily customer, that dwelling unit does not receive the bill. I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that.
And to complete the circle, just for sport, the people who are single family, you'll excuse me if this covers any of you, are so rich they don't care about their water bill.
I think some of them do, which is part of the controversy that we have, is that a lot of the residential customers thought they were being singled out and that their rates were going to be higher and that they were, you know, since they were actually seeing a bill and using more, the question is were they being unfairly treated? They had questions about if multifamily occupancy was at a certain level, that the town was actually not getting money because there was so much vacancy, let's say in the multifamily, and since it's spread out over the population of the condominium, it wasn't being equitably collected because there were vacancies. But the fact is that if you look at not only seasonality showing of water year round, the fact is that in multifamily, the use inside a unit in an apartment isn't really affected by the vacancy in terms of on an annual basis. Most of the water is used by irrigation, by air handlers, et cetera, by pools, and the variation of occupancy doesn't really affect anything. And so and in terms of fairness, when I look at the Southwest Water study versus what Mr. Ori's company provided, it mirrors it perfectly. So if we do this based on water consumption and sewage, we're going to have the proper flows. I think, as Natasha pointed out, you know, averaging 4 if we use the alternative. I think it's fair. It has people who use the system more are paying more, and it promotes conservation. It provides for the updating of the systems themselves. It gets us money up front. I think a 5-year plan is great. We're going to reduce our debt, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, the alternative plan, I'm 100% in favor of it. I'm in favor of the 4 tiers. I'm in favor of the enterprise part of it. I'm in favor of moving the money that's just sitting there stale. It'd be great if we could move more of it over, and charging the people who use the system more. So I'm 100% in favor of Mr. Ori's study. And I think it's totally fair.
If that was for me to respond to, I don't disagree. My point is simply that the people that live in Highland Beach are not price sensitive to water, and we can make any kind of recommendation that makes the system more equitable, and there'll be no one really protesting it in one way or the other. I wouldn't think.
There will be.
Oh, well,
I can assure you.
Teresa, this is Matt. I wanted to see if you could insert a couple of numbers next to the blue portion of this spreadsheet. If you go over, you see right there, the percentages that make up the flow. So 31% of the flow is from the residential class, 65% from the multifamily, and 4% to commercial, which is basically the Delray Sands. If you could insert next to this, next to those numbers, next to the 31%, 28.4, next to the 65%, 67.7, and next to the 4%, 3.9. So what those numbers that I just asked her to insert there reflects the percent of revenue generated by class of customer. So if you compare in terms of equity, you have 31% of the flow generating 28.4% of the revenue. You have 65% of the flow generating about 68% of the revenue. And you have 4% of the flow generating roughly 4% for the commercial class of customer. So in terms of, for lack of a better phrase, equity, that shows that there is some underlying equity in this rate structure in terms of which class of customer generates which percentage of the revenue of the system.
so the residentials are underpaying by 2% or 2.5%.
Right, correct.
And we're talking about a gross amount of revenue, and I'm not sure you do it on the whole of around 3 million, because probably not on the wastewater, right? This is simply on the.
That is really just reflecting the numbers for the water side. If we were to do that same process there, it is. It's in line there too, where it's really only a, not exactly the same percentage difference there, but really about 1% on the residential side, difference between flow and revenue. On the multifamily, about 3%, and on the commercial class, about 1%. So it's not really off all that much. It's hard to really get it to match up exactly, just because there's going to be differences over the course of the year in terms of the flow for each class of customer.
Right. But back of the envelope, what you're saying is that the residential people are underpaying by, let's say, $50,000, $60,000.
They're paying less, yeah.
They're paying less.
Yeah, they're paying a little. They're paying a little less.
But
the
amount that they're paying less cumulatively is around $50,000 or $60,000.
Right, even with the price elasticity. That's right. Price increase.
So I mean,
do you want the sewer ones?
I'm sorry.
Do you want the sewer ones?
No, I don't need the sewer. I mean, I'm just saying, if there's a spread of say 2.5%, 3% in favor of the residential customers on a total revenue of $3 million, give or take, you're talking about, so what is that, $90,000?
Roughly.
So that's, so we're, if you wanted this to be more equitable, if the purpose of this whole exercise is to be more equitable as between those two groups, you're talking about fixing a problem of an allocation of $90,000. That's obviously separate from the fact that you want to increase revenues overall. I'm just talking about addressing the split between class of customers.
Where it's more pronounced the sewer, actually, it's. That's a good observation, Matt.
That's why we're fixing the, presumably, if we adopt this plan, it'll take care of that generally, right?
And my final point would be what accounts for that disparity is that the flat rate currently is too low to reach those residential customers. Because it's not the per gallon charge. That gap in the table probably doesn't amount to much, the way I look at it. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it's the flat rate charge is too low for the residential customers because they pay fewer flat rate charges compared to the multifamily, who pays a lot of flat rate charges, I imagine.
They do. That's evident on the dollar per gallon based thing comparison I talked to you earlier. That is correct, and your observation supports that average cost. So you're right.
Right.
I
So
still go back to, we need a better definition of what fairness or equitable we're trying to achieve. Because I don't know if, the average rate per class is what we're trying to do, or if there's some other metric that we're supposed to, get at. And I feel like that's what I personally need more direction on in order to, make a more concrete decision on this. If the definition is that each class pays for each, their, what's in column R, then it's fixing this. But if it's something else, we haven't thought of, or something else that someone else is thinking of, I feel like we need to know that.
Wasn't that, that's what the proposal is the fairness is based on who uses the product, correct? That's it. That's the
Well,
fair.
I think that's only partially in the proposal, and we can certainly get into that later. I would encourage us to complete the presentation before we get into some of these more philosophical discussions, because I think I tend to look at it a little bit differently than some of the views that have been expressed so far.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should move on.
Okay, let's move on. Thank you.
We're going to stay in the go to the sample bills we're collecting, because we're kind of talking about this. So I thought I may show you some. We called them low, medium, and average users. Kind of show you what the effects may be to your customers as you're thinking about this. The blue that you see there is residential. We start with low to the left, average in the middle, and then I can't see it really, but we'll move it over to and that's the higher user. Thank you. And these are actual customers that we got data from. We're not going to tell you who they are, but we just try to look at, if we can go to the lower one first. I just want to kind of show you, and I'll define what low is. But each graph or table is set up the same way. The first column to the left is the monthly flow at this the bi-monthly flow at this customer's premise. The second column is the bill they're paying today. The third column would be that uniform increase across the board with any little bit of those tier adjustments we mentioned earlier. And then the fourth columns are the alternative rates and the percent difference to the uniform rate, how they get affected by doing this. So let's look at the first one's a low user. We said people, 5,000 gallons every 2 months. This is a very, very low user. But this is an actual bill. And you can see on the water side with the rate adjustments, the rates produce about the same cost to this customer. And we wanted to show you 6 months because you can see variability. Because 1 month I may get a rate increase. I'm sorry, by month, I say month, I mean by month. You know, the first bill I may get a rate increase. The second bill I could get a rate decrease because my flows are different. You know, so we wanted to show that to you. Now sewer, very interesting, low flow. So when I go to volumetric and I'm not using any sewer, I'm getting the benefit. I'm not contributing anything to the sewer system under this parameter of indoor use in that first block. So no change. This customer is going to get a rate decrease. This guy right here, even with the increases, he's going to get a rate decrease. Why? Because of the sewer change. And the sewer change is affecting the most. The average user, this person uses about 25,000 gallons or less every month. That's that average I mentioned earlier. Yes, you see 56 in the corner there on column N11, but right there. But this again, that's every 2 months. And I'd love to tell you who this is, but I'm not going to. But you can see water, actually this person got a little bit of a decrease in water when you compare the uniform increase to the alternative increase. That's because of the block changes. We're trying to shift it. The reason why I was trying to shift it a little bit, if you look at sewer, they're getting the maximum increase they can get. They're over 20,000 gallons every 2 months. We are capping the flow charge at 10,000 gallons a month or 20,000 gallons. That's the first block also for the water. Our thought was if you're using more than 20,000 gallons every 2 months, that's not being returned to the sewer, and we capped it. This is a very common policy in Florida. Not every utility does it, but I would say the majority, well in the majority do. So they get the maximum increase, and that's that larger increase people have talked about. It's because of shift. But if you look at the total, his bill is in 3 to 4% different from the alternative. He's right at the average. He's not going to pay much of a difference between the two. Even though he got a large sewer increase, we've right-sized that where his ship is by the fact he's paying more sewer, but his water, he's fair, he's reasonable compared to that class. When you look at the large user, the guy to the right, he's 4 times bigger than the guy on the left. He's using 234,000 gallons every 2 months. This guy's using over 110,000 gallons a month. He's going to get an increase. He's 100% of the sewer increase. You see the $79. It caps, but he's paying for that. But his water bill is higher because we tiered it more to try to capture this the cost. And his bill will be about 15% higher under the alternative. He's a large user. And so that's the change. You can more what the water management districts by looking at the 4 tiers mentioned earlier, more linking the indoor, outdoor use. This is a large user. That one bi-monthly period, he used over 500 million gallons of water, 500,000 gallons of water. I don't think he's looking at his bill, but it kind of gives you the endpoints. If you look at multifamily, we've done 6 of these, and they follow the same general theory: low user per unit, average per unit, and high per unit. But this orange you see here that Mark put together for us, these are a small number of units per multifamily customer. 8. This one has, for example, the first one where the cursor is. That's about 8 units in this little condominium. And if you look at the relationship here, without going into a lot of detail, the sewer is capped at 20,000 gallons bi-monthly times 8 units. It's not 20,000, it's 20,000 times 8 because each unit gets a cap. And so do the blocks, they follow that as well. And if you see this curve here, hardly any change water, reduction in sewer, total bill reduction, that's the exact same as up top for residential. these customers are paying the exact rate, same rate for dwelling unit. If a house in a multifamily unit uses the exact same flow per dwelling unit, they're going to pay the same rate. Exactly the same rate. Doesn't matter. So if you think about this, you can see that the average of small user, they're using about 12, 13. This is a little, we kind of have a hard time trying to find that are higher. But they do get a rate increase. They get it on the sewer side because they are contributing to the sewer system. So this Wiltshire house will actually get a higher increase on the alternative, but they should. They're contributing more sewer flow than the Highland Ocean House condo. Edmonton Bay, twice the use of the Wiltshire, same general trend as we talked about for the earlier one. Not quite as pronounced, but if you slide to the left, it's a hair, one more cell. I got pictures blocking it. The other way. A little bit more. There you go. Great. It's the same type of thing. And again, it's the sewer increase that's getting you. This guy went past the cap. 20,000 gallons per unit cap. You can see it's 1,036 all the way down. We're not billing them all the sewer because they have outdoor use. We talked about irrigation earlier. I think one of their meters, it can have multiple meters. One of them may be irrigation. It's all grouped together as one customer, but you could have irrigation use. And I did mention this earlier. That's why we want to have an irrigation rate. If someone says, I'm getting off the sewer system, we're going to get the irrigation side. I don't want you to lose any revenue. So that you know about that. So any event, which the water management is at a higher price, by the way, too. So if you look at those, now let's go to a multifamily that has a lot of units. You know, these were small guys, but let's go to the ones with more units in them. This first one has 110, but they have low use per unit. Even though they have a lot more units, they have low use per unit, and you can see the same trend. Under all of them, it's the same trend. So even though it's a large condominium, the next one's 339 units, they're averaging between 5,000 gallons and 11,000 gallons per unit a month. Here's some of your seasonality, by the way. This is what I expected the seasonality on the phone, the seasonality that we talked about earlier. This one has it, which I thought was interesting. And their bill will be higher in those winter months. As you can, if you look at the total, it's about 10% higher than the non-winter months. Back to the other one, the penthouse towers, higher use. We could really, again, they were more at the average than a high end, and they really follow more of the Coronado. So the bill comparisons per unit are about the same as we're going forward. It really depends on the utilization criteria of each customer. And I don't disagree, those people in penthouse towers, Coronado, Wilshire, Edmonton, they personally will not see their bill. The homeowners association or condo association will see the bill. And my experience has been they try to get that bill knocked down as much as possible as part of their budgetary process. But individual unit, you can't affect them because they don't see it. I agree with that. But this kind of gives you a feel of these are actual bills, actual effects by this rate increase. And I thought it provided the direction that you're looking for. And I think from a fairness standpoint, one thing I think is fair for those that are using the system, they're paying for the system, i.e. for example. If they're higher, they require higher demands for water, they're paying a higher price for it. Because you've got to build those RO facilities to meet those peak days, not the average days. And those are the most expensive ones. So that you're talking about, that's kind of part of it. It's the whole picture that we're looking at. And I thought, recognizing everything that the result we got, although it may not be the best in the world, I thought was met the objectives we were looking for. Yeah, you can go back to the other.
Let me
Those are the questions.
Let me ask you an oversimplified question.
Yes,
You
sir.
can pick any one of these condos, Coronado, Penthouse, and so forth. If you look, assuming the same usage, same sewer, same usage, if you look at what they're paying as a total condominium today with the same usage, with the rate increase, what will that condominium be paying next year, the year after, and the year after? Because that's going to interpret how much they have to go back with their quarterlies or their yearlies to the individual customer. So I'd like to get kind of a feel whether we're talking hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars. I understand your examples here on a macro, basis. So when you get down to the unit, can you address that?
I can, let me how to answer your question. What I can tell you is if you could leave this for a second and go back to the PowerPoint presentation, that's easy to do. Your question, Chairman, hold on one second. If you could get to, gosh, I think it's up a slide. Go one more if you don't mind. And I'm going to call my PowerPoint presentation. I've got the same presentation. Well, I thought I'm going to go to it too. At the condo association, first of all, to be very honest with you, it's hard to answer that because the flows are different per unit. But if I go back to that average, where there's a lot of the residential condos are at that 5,000 gallons, I could say at 5,000 gallons, they would pay the increase for 5,000 gallons. Just bear with me a second. I got to calculate it. That would be 2.75, 2.77. They would, okay, hold on, almost there. They would pay. It's 5,000 gallons a month. I gotta do it twice. Going slow here. So that'd be 10,000 gallons.
I may have it. I don't know. I'm using your spreadsheet and I'm looking at penthouse towers. And if I look at the bottom row,
They get a decrease. If you use exactly 5, go back to the, I'm sorry, go back to the Excel spreadsheet. Let's just do that.
yeah. So if I look at the current bill for the latest month or for the latest period, it's like $14,227, and there are 138 units. So if I don't know if I'm doing the math right, but if it's 14,000 divided by the 138 units, the current is $103. If the proposed, there's two proposed. One of them is the 16,967. If I do that, divide that by 138 units, you get $122.96. So that's a $20 increase, basically.
Yes.
And then under the alternative, it's the $17,011 divided by the 138. That's 123. So 123 compared to the 103, that's again a $20 increase.
That's about right.
So I think it's a $20 increase on a bi-monthly basis. So it's $10 per month increase on the penthouse tower unit owner.
Right, for water and sewer service.
Right.
Right, that's correct. Thank you. I was struggling there.
And then,
Yeah, so I got the answers right here. So yes, for that guy, he'd get a $10 increase.
Okay, I just want to ask the same question for a private, a single unit,
Like a residential customer?
residential, yeah.
Okay, residential, if you go up, these guys use a lot more per flow. So let me go to the high guy first. He's getting this guy with right here. If you look at the 270, he get a $900 bi-monthly increase. 534,000 gallons. Let's go up to 230. Let's go back more to his normal use. Go up to the first one, that one right there. That's about $350 or so. However, again, he's using 234,000 gallons per unit, not 23,000 gallons per unit. If you go to the more of the typical, that 25,000 gallons a month or 56,000 gallons over there, he's getting a $60 a month increase.
Which is justified since we've been carrying him for a long time.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I understand that. That's,
It's all, and it's all in the sewer.
That's not my calc. I don't get that. Isn't it the 232 minus the 198? Isn't that his increase? Isn't that like a?
That's the increase above the uniform. From the current, it's 279. That's what he's paying today.
The guy in
Oh,
the
you're looking at
penthouse,
the top row. You're looking, okay, I was looking at the bottom row. I think it depends on what month.
and the guy
Yes.
in the penthouse that gets the $10 increase, he doesn't know he's even getting an increase.
Slide down. Let's make sure it's $10. Let's go back down to penthouse again.
Oh, only because I looked at the low, the bottom row. That's what I was basing it on.
Now, the penthouse is getting 17,011.2. Look, I'm looking at the very last row.
Rob, don't use the last row.
What?
Don't use the last row. Use the first row.
Oh, okay.
All right, I'll use the first row.
Yeah.
All right. Your recommendation, I'll do that.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, that's $20. That's what I
They
get.
get a $32.12 increase per unit. And the multifamily use more water was getting like, what did I say it was? $60, $50?
60.
60
for what period of time?
bi-monthly.
Bi-monthly.
Bi-monthly, okay.
Again, this penthouse towers is 14,000 gallons a unit. And then when we looked at for the residential earlier was 56,000 gallons a unit per se.
And we don't even know how that guy's really paying because we don't know how the penthouse towers allocates that bill.
We do not.
Mhm.
No offense. It's, you're asking,
I would assume they allocate it by unit.
No, well, they either allocate it by unit, but people might have more shares. If they have more valuable units, they might say, you live in the penthouse, I live in the basement. So you have
Yeah.
more of a,
Yeah, there's some 3 bedrooms and some 1 bedrooms in there, but most of them are 2 bedrooms. Yeah, you're right. They do. Yeah, there's some, but most of them are
Right.
2.
so going back to the, like how our rate changes will affect people's perception of their water bill,
Right.
I would say not so much. At least not in these scenarios.
90% of, it's like 90 or 91% of Highland Beach is condos, right?
I think so.
90 to 91% of the individuals won't know there's even a change.
Correct.
Well, yeah, it'll probably work its way through the monthly fees. I mean, I don't think all the everybody's condo fees are going to have to go up a little bit, right?
Just because of the water?
Yeah.
I've been living here. I've been living in I live in Boca Cove on Russell Drive. I don't know what that association is. And from the first day I've been here until today, they've never raised the rates, not a bit. And I assume other expenses have gone up. This is, after all, America, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to absorb.
Right. So, and if when they do raise it, when they're finally going to say, okay, we had to raise it, they're not going to say, aha, it was the water rates. They went up $10 per unit.
Well, I mean, I think we can't assume that we're all our entities are going to govern the same way or be as efficient or not efficient or whatever. I mean, I think the question is this plan fair and equitable? I think it is.
Right. I agree with that, but the statistic of 91% that I just heard, 90% of the people will not know that there's a change, and the other 10 or 9%, you charge them $6 more and they'll lose their minds, despite the fact that perhaps they're the ones best able to afford it. But so we just have to do what's equitable, based on, our recommendation will ultimately be whatever we think is equitable, but we're not going to hear about it from the vast majority, 90% of individuals, despite the fact that they're affected, they're not even gonna know.
I think if we could figure out how to dump this whole thing on the Delray Sands, we'd all be very happy, and maybe, or we could use it as leverage to get free drinks. We'll give free drinks to all Highland Beach people if we don't increase your rates.
Right.
Hmm.
I've been in
You
the
know-
tax business for 40 years, and there's an expression, don't tax you, don't tax me, tax the fellow behind the tree. And I think that the Delray Sands is behind the tree at this moment.
Neil, with all due respect, we have an obligation at the end of this thing to let the residents know what the plan is going, what the increases in the rates are going to be. And we have to be upfront and forward with that. Now, whether they care or not, it's a different issue, but I'm trying to get an understanding of, because when it affects the individual and it goes into the quarterlies or the yearly, it eventually comes back. Now, different things are going to be different. I understand that. I'm just trying to get a feel, which I now have, for what the differences would be. And thank you for that.
I completely agree with that analysis. But at the end of the day, they used to say this about a firm I worked for when I was making very little money, and they would give you a very small raise. We used to say they were heaving nickels around like they were manhole covers. And I have the sensation that on the vast majority of people here and the vast majority of accounts, we're heaving nickels around like they were manhole covers. You're right, we have to do it. We have to be fair, our perception of fair. But for the vast majority of people here, what is it that we're talking about? This is a long presentation, and I actually am enjoying it because it's enlightening in many ways. But here's the Cliff Notes summary. We got to raise the rates to capture some additional revenue, and there's a disparity between multifamily and single family, and we have to fix that disparity. Those are the two things that we have to address, and we're going to adopt the alternative plan. And that's the bottom line. And getting into it, at the level of, what year is written on each one of the coins is, gets to be a little, we already know where this is going, don't we all?
No,
No?
not necessarily. All right.
Okay.
Let's
carry
move
on.
on with the presentation, please.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm gonna skip some slides in the presentation. If we can get back to there. I mean, we've kind of gone through on the bill comparisons. If you would slide down, just get to the first graph. I just want to say what we're skipping, so and we can talk about it. We developed some graphs earlier. You probably saw this from the commission meeting. We have several of them, but this kind of shows you what you just saw in the bill comparison, which I think is probably a little easier to comprehend. But this graph, for example, is the residential going up to 100,000 gallons. The blue line is existing today's rates. Green is the alternative rate, and red is just a uniform increase. And you can see on this curve that if you were under 68,000, 70,000 gallons or so, and above 16, you'll get a slight decrease. If you're using over that 100,000 plus 1,000 gallons by monthly, that large user, they're going to get a higher increase here. That peach color you see on the curve, that's the number of bills. Let me see. That's I thought that was the bills rendered. You got flow per unit. That was bills rendered. I'll have to go back. I'm sorry. I'll have to go back and look at that. So
Yeah, it is bills rendered, Rob.
okay, that's what I thought. I don't like it.
I'm not sure why it's called flow per unit.
You're right. That peach is the amount of bills rendered relative to those gallons. So if you just look at 100, 85% approximately of the residential bills have been rendered at that point in time, at that flow. 85% of your customers use 100,000 gallons or less by monthly. That's what that shows you. So as you're looking at this, that's what it means. We did one also, I think, for, if you go to the next slide, please. This was water. This is the one I wanted to kind of show you. This kind of amplifies that effect of a flat rate versus a volumetric rate. This is wastewater. The blue is where we are today at $44 a unit. $55 a unit roughly. No change. You can see it's right across. Everybody pays the same thing. And in the green is that flow base charge approach where we cap it at the 20,000 gallons or 10,000 monthly, and everybody pays the same thereafter. It kind of shows you the differences. And those people that use a lot of water or contributing to the wastewater, that's where those increases are. Remember those bills, the low guys, they were getting an overall bill decrease. That's over here on the left, 0 to 5,000 gallons. You look there, you can see the green is below the blue. And those that use 17, 18, 19,000 gallons over to the right, you can see that the blue to the green is pretty pronounced. And that's what that flow charge relationship does. It shifts the dollars from the low end to the upper end. Those are using or contributing or paying, technically, is the theory. And that's where I mentioned earlier about fairness. If you're looking at contribution, they should be paying more. Those larger users should be paying more because they're contributing more. So that I just wanted to point those two out as you're looking at the slides. I imagine you'll probably get back and look at these. I believe we had some other graphs. One was next one, I think it's combined water and sewer. You can go ahead and go past that. It's same concept. This just shows you the revenues by class. What I would like to do is get to slide 23. It's got a bunch of words on it. One more. There you go. To get back and try to answer some of your questions on advantages and disadvantages. Under the current structure, it's very stable. We mentioned earlier, 63% fixed cost recovery. I think the alternative is in the 35 to 40%. I got to double check that. Another advantage is the customers are used to the rate structure. They're paying it now. That's what they've been. And anytime you make a change, there's always an issue. Second, on the keeping the current rate structure, if you raise the rates, I'm gonna make this number up. You raise the rates 20%, everybody's getting a 20% bill increase. Whether it's $1 or $2, it's 20% increase based on what you use. However, there's a lot of difference between multifamily and single family. As we all talked and looked at the rates and the per unit costs, multifamily is paying a lot more than single family because of that base charge, and that can be a disadvantage. And low use flat sewer customers, those that you don't have a lot of water, like that one multifamily account we looked at that was using 4,000 and 5,000 gallons a unit, they're being charged for sewer that they may not be contributing. I made this point earlier and I want to make it again. Your purchase wastewater cost is volumetric. It's not flat. It's based on the amount of contribution. I know billed water that's used to charge for sewer and flow being delivered are two different things, but it is volumetric. So at least under a volume approach, there's a little more of a link between contribution and payment to Delaware. Advantages on the alternative, I do think it promotes equitability. There's more contribution, customers pay more on flow contribution. You also introduced the same rate structure, basically base variable in the system. Most utilities try to charge the same type of structure to the extent possible, and this will be doing that. A little bit stronger conservation incentive. We did try to tie it more to the essential discretionary excessive use, which I think the water management districts like. And we looked at 350 gallons per day as that block differential, which is actually a pretty high flow use. That was. I will tell you, you saw in the comparisons, the disadvantage is changing rate structure. There will be winners and losers. And by that, I mean, I could get no increase and my neighbor could get a 30% increase just because you changed the structure. But that's sometimes viewed as a disadvantage. We do have some reduced revenue stability because we got more flow reliance. And the customers just aren't familiar with the rate structure. There could be some customer use changes. Another was mentioned earlier, could be some more customer service calls, changes in calls like pool filling, etc. That could be there. But those are the advantages, disadvantages. And I know you all have a hard decision, but when we look at the rate comparison, which is the next slide, two slides, excuse me, go one more, please. This is a comparison. This is monthly use, just so you know, because almost all these utilities bill monthly. There's some that may do bi-monthly, but most of them bill monthly. And this is the rate that go into effect in 2021 under the alternative scenario. Your existing rates right now are the fifth one from the left. It's the lighter color blue and the lighter color red, blue being water, red being sewer. You can see you're very competitive, but if you think about it, you're not recovering all the costs, hence a lot of your debt service, obviously all your debt service almost is in the general fund. As we start moving it, that first adjustment, they really get us moving, you're still below the average. We're about 5 more over to the right, which is alternative, right there, exactly. You're still below the average, even with those large adjustments to start moving you to the right direction. You are still competitive with your neighbor at 25,000 gallons of use. I will tell you, and that's the 2021 rate compared to the 2020 rates, everybody else. There are rate increases coming. Jupiter's got about 2% increase coming. Village of Golf has just employed a rate study to get started. I think they're in their last year of a rate phasing. DeQuesta is looking at 6% per year next couple of years. Wellington, I believe, is 3 to 5%. Martin County has indexing. I think that's it. That's about 2%. Village of Palm Springs just finished the rate adjustment. I think they're in the 5% range. Same with Cooper. The point, West Palm's got 4% water, 3% sewer. I know Manalapan will be doing a rate adjustment from the fact that they just lost half their customers. So the point I'm trying to make is you're going to see these customers, these bills for everybody else probably shift too. So my point is, I think we will remain competitive going forward in the future. If I get the last rate last year, maybe Mark, you can help me. If I can get the average bill at 25,000 gallons in fiscal 2025, I'll see if I can do that real quick. If you want to bear with me, just, I should like calculate this 1 second. Let's see, it's 12.5. Hold on, I'm getting there. It'll take me a second. Maybe take it longer. I think it will.
Do you want to do the current or the alternative, Rob?
I want the alternative. If you can calculate alternative fiscal year 20, the last year, the fourth.
Yeah, that's fine.
If you can calculate that for me, get back to it. The point
Yep.
I'm trying to get to, I looked at this earlier. I'm sorry for not having the number on my fingertips. We'll get it for you. But that 156 number you see for Highland Beach alternative year 1, if we shut it over for 4 more years, if you adopted all the increases, you're still going to be less than Dania, Lake Worth, Coral Springs. I think Broward, I think you may be less than as well. I can just take the percentage increase and try to calculate it. The point is, although you'll be going to the other end a little bit.
257.
257?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I showed the 2025 rate, you'd be where Manalapan is today. That's where you'd be. So you still would not be the highest in the area, even with the full implementation of the general fund transfers for the debt, increased O&M, and all these other guys are going to move again anyway. So I feel that you've done a good job controlling costs. You've done a good job in maintaining your system. You're on the right track fiscally, I think, with your plan, and you're still going to be, I think, competitive, although not where you are today. Being too low of a rate can be detrimental as well. That's where Lake Worth used to be 15 years ago. They were so proud how low their rates were. I told them, I went to a meeting with them, I said, you can undervalue yourself and you need to be careful. Who's there today on this, I believe, is Riviera Beach. They're grossly undervalued. And they got some major stuff coming. So anyway, so that kind of gives you a feel. I know comparing to the community is not the way to set rates, but everyone asks it. And so I thought it'd be good to show you that the point is you're not out of line, which I was real pleased to see. And that, the last slide, please. It's just a kind of a summary. No, I'm sorry, go up one, I apologize. If we implement this, it does allow the town to, fund that capital plan, the $6 million plan. It does, I think it promotes a favorable credit. You look better fiscally. You can transfer the debt repayment to the enterprise fund, as you know, and maintain a pretty good, strong fiscal position with competitive rates. I think that's a good plan. Next slide. The question that becomes, what do you want to adopt? We would recommend the alternative rate structure. If you want to see an adjustment or something different, let us know, and we'll figure out if we can do it. Either structure will work, but I think the alternative structure, I feel, meets the objectives you're looking for. And no matter what we do, keep monitoring this thing, because as you change rates, if you go that route, you need to keep an eye on it, because there is a little bit more variability now, and life is different than it was 6 months ago. So, and with that, I'll open for that. This is the end of our presentation we had, but obviously we're here for any more questions or thoughts or discussions or anything you may have.
Anybody have a question? I have a comment. First of all, thank you for an excellent presentation.
Thanks.
I'd just like to introduce a different approach that would decrease the amount being directly charged to the owners, and would result, though, in a no tax reduction on the tax percent. I believe that part of the money in our reserves came from the sale of the Boca Raton water plant property. We may want to consider transferring partial lump sum of that money to the water fund, offsetting capital expenditures. The reserve will be replenished by not reducing the tax rate. This approach would reduce the direct increase to the owners while making the water waste self-sustaining for the next 5 years. I just introduced that as something to think about as an alternative to the way we're approaching. In no way do I disagree with having to raise the rates, and I as well like the alternative, but just in the way we fund it and how we're reaching the residents. So I just wanted to put that as a suggestion.
Mr. Stern, can I ask you a question? Because I'm not real familiar with that. The property you're referencing, the Boca Raton, what was it again?
Water plant, yeah.
Water plant, okay.
Well, we had water wells on that property and was sold. The money, I believe, was put into the general reserve.
Is it general water or general fund?
The general fund, I believe.
General fund. That's what I was trying to. So you're saying is if it's in the general fund, take those dollars, put that in the reserves, buy down the rates, and change the millage. That's what I think, or buy down the debt.
And then replenish the general reserves by not reducing the effective tax rate.
I understand.
It's a thought, something to consider.
No, okay. I was trying to figure out where the money was as you were talking.
Yeah.
I wasn't familiar with it.
Yeah, the money is in the general reserve.
Just, verify all the information I just gave. Those are the best to my recollection of what happened in the past.
Okay. I was thanking you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none on this issue, I thank you again for the presentation. It's excellent.
Thank
I
you.
hope the commission is listening to this Zoom and can get the input, and will of course be very happy to answer any additional questions or anything else they would like us to look into on this project. So
Also, and I'd like to thank you all too. The questions were excellent. I really appreciate the dialogue. It's nice to kind of have it. And so I can tell you not only read stuff, but you did research too. So I really appreciate that. And thank you very much. I appreciate
thank you.
it. All right.
Are there any board member reports? Hearing none, just announcements. October 6th.
We're gonna,
Whoops. Go ahead.
excuse me. I have some comments. Is that
Oh,
appropriate at
please,
this
go
time?
right
or-
ahead. I'm sorry, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I've been kind of holding this. I know a lot of discussion occurred during the presentation, which I kind of held off on until we got our questions answered. But I have a little bit different approach than what's been expressed by many of our colleagues. I think if we step back a little bit and get out of the leaves and twigs and look at the forest for a couple of minutes. The consultants, I thought, did a really good job. They did get us a lot of information and a basis to start discussions with some reasonable proposals. We're talking about fees, we're talking about taxes, which automatically means that no matter what everybody comes up with, some people are going to think it's unfair, and a lot of people aren't going to be happy. This represents somewhat of a change. This has always been somewhat of a variable water and sewage, always a variable use kind of service. Most of our taxes obviously are not. I mean, most of our taxes are based on what the assessed value of your property is. And then that goes to the fire department, the police department, the library, administration, et cetera, irrespective of how much that individual may use those services. So we've decided, and I think rightfully so, that water and sewer is different, and there should at least be a usage component to the fee structure, rather than a totally flat fee structure. And I would agree that that's reasonable. The question, I think, is how do you do that and where do you draw the lines? And there's no right answer to that question. I mean, and again, you heard it amongst our discussions today. I mean, there's no exactly right answer. The consultants came up with an answer. It's not the answer. And the way I tend to look at that is if we are going to go to a structure that's part fixed and part variable, one of the things we really need to know that really was not covered in their report is what are really the variable versus fixed components of the expenses that go into the amount of money that we need to raise as revenue to make the water and sewage enterprise an independent enterprise. And I don't know that we know that, and I suspect that the fixed component is a lot more than one would suspect. And what do I mean by that? And I don't know the answers to these. I suspect that the people running the water department, and maybe Matt would know. But I don't know, for example, if our water usage goes up a little or down somewhat, that it's going to change the number of employees we have, which is a big part of our fixed costs, unless they become variable costs based on usage, which I don't think that they do. So if what we're really looking at is the only variable part of our water enterprise is really the cost of additional chemicals per gallon and additional RO filters per gallon, and not much else, then I'm not really sure how much of that should really be variable based on usage. For sewer, it's a little easier to figure out some of it, because certainly one can make the argument that our contract with Delray is all volumetric, and therefore all of that is variable. So that portion of the sewer expense, I think one can make a good argument that that should be variable based on usage. The remainder, however, of the sewer expenses, many of which occur in our town, I don't think are appreciably variable at all. I think they're largely fixed. So the multiple millions of dollars of capital that are being proposed to fix our sewage pipe is a fixed expense. That's not based on individual usage. That's if the town is going to have a sewage system, it has to have a sewage system. And the same goes for our lifts and our lift maintenance and all the other components and the labor and all the other components, the billing process, administrative, all of it, all those expenses are pretty much fixed expenses. So I think if we are going to be going increasingly, we already have it on the water side. If we're going to be going to it on the sewer side, then it behooves us to figure out, well, what part of this enterprise is really fixed expense, fixed capital expense, et cetera, versus truly variable that in turn should be funded by usage, as opposed to just turning the switch on and off. And I don't know that we have that particular component of the information. Again, looking for fairness, and everybody's going to find fairness in different parameters, and there's no right or wrong answer. I had on my list, Chairman, the same suggestion that you had with it, which is that several members of the commission have suggested that our general reserve fund has grown larger than it needs to be. And I would think that it's my recollection as well that most of the money in the general reserve came from sale of really what would now be considered water enterprise assets some years ago. That possibly some of that money could move over to pay off or to avoid issuance of newer bonds. Again, the finance people would have to comment on that. And then finally, my last comment on this that I think would be helpful to know, and this would come from Matt, is as we go to this fully self-sustaining water and sewer program and away from subsidies from the general revenue stream, that should result in less expenses on the general revenue side, which could, I'm not saying should, but could result in reduced millage rates. And it would be of some interest if the proposals here were followed to see what the corresponding reduction of millage rates might be, where those in turn obviously would accrue whatever they are. I don't know how significant they would be, but would accrue more to people whose properties were higher value, just as their taxes are different. So anyway, just some points to consider that I think are possibly a little bit more broad stroke than the 1 or 2% here or there on a particular rate or volume.
Thank you for your comments. I didn't want to cut anybody short. If there's anybody else has any comments, we'd love to hear them. Matt, if you have anything, town manager, is anything?
I didn't know, Matt, do you have data on what is the share of our expenses that are fixed versus variable?
I don't believe I have that information.
I didn't think that you did, but there was an EPA. I found an EPA study. I don't know if it was the study you guys gave me or one I found or whatever. But in that EPA study, they touched a lot on the issue of fixed versus variable in the rate structure and, philosophies on, what's the best way to approach it. But I did find a comment in there that it said, according to this EPA study, that 70% of the costs, and I don't know if Highland Beach is the same, this is just a general study based on water utilities. They were saying that 70%, like to run the utilities, is coming from the fixed portion and that the remaining is variable. So I thought that was interesting when I looked at how Highland Beach did it, where 63% of our revenue was coming from the flat fee and the rest was coming from the variable. So I thought that was interesting that lined up. Like I said, I don't know if Highland Beach has the same split as what was noted in this EPA study, but that was the closest thing that I found to that. But yeah, I think playing with that fixed versus variable, that's how we get to that whole, what each class pays per, their contribution to the revenue. So if there's some other, I think I said it earlier, I don't know what our definition of fair and equitable is. And I think that's key to this conversation.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the comment. Anyone else? Okay, then I'll move along to the announcements. October the 6th at 1:30 is a.
I'm sorry,
visual-
Chairperson Stein.
I'm sorry?
There's another item on the agenda, 7C. That would be the calendar year meeting dates for the.
Oh, to do that afterwards. Okay, I'll go back to that. And that is there a motion to approve the 2021 calendar year meeting dates. They were in your packet. It was January 28th, April 22nd, May 6th for organizational meeting, tentative, July 22nd, and October 28th. Is there a motion to accept those dates?
Motion to accept.
Is there a second, please?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Well, thank you. We'll put that on the record. Thank you very much. And now we'll go to announcements. October the 6th, virtual town commission regular meeting at 1:30 PM. October 8th, virtual planning board regular meeting at 9:30 AM. October 12th is closed from observance of Columbus Day. And October 22nd, the virtual financial advisory board meeting, which is a tentative at 2 PM. And based upon the feedback from the town, we will schedule that if it's appropriate. Okay, if there's no other business, I would entertain a motion to adjourn, please,
Meeting is adjourned at 4:53.
at 4:53. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? And I want to thank you all for your attention on this thing. I know it's a long meeting and there's some great points brought up and boy, the backup material are pages and pages. So thank you once again. I hope we're being helpful to the commission and I'm sure they'll come back to us for further assistance. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.